Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. Another beautiful day in the Caribbean, beautiful island paradise. That is why, my friends, the United States of America and China is currently in a fight for influence in the Caribbean. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, just completed his visit in Suriname, and he had a lot to say. And China would have said in the past what their plans are in the Caribbean. Currently, China is investing billions of dollars in the Caribbean. My friends, I want you to listen to this audio clip of the Chinese foreign minister and what she had to say about the Caribbean and China's policy in the Caribbean.
Nations? The U.S. seems to think so, and that's why Trump's administration is now drawing a red line on China's growing influence.
China and Caribbean countries have a long tradition of friendly exchanges. Our diplomatic relations are roughly as old as CARICOM. 10 years ago, President Xi Jinping paid a historic visit to Trinidad and Tobago and met with leaders of all the Caribbean countries having diplomatic relations with China and established the China-Caribbean Comprehensive Cooperative Partnership. And ever since then, we have seen made great achievements and accomplishments, and China-Caribbean relations has become a shining example of mutual respect, equality, mutual benefit, and win-win cooperation.
Reports suggest that Trump has privately warned Caribbean leaders that continued alignment with China could have serious consequences. His administration views China's economic involvement in the region as a direct challenge to U.S. authority. Washington's fear is that these projects are not just about business, but also about Beijing gaining long-term strategic leverage over the region. With China controlling key infrastructure, the U.S. worries that Caribbean nations might be forced to side with Beijing in future diplomatic disputes. A senior White House official reportedly...
There you go, my friends, and that's what the Chinese ambassador had to say, and you would have heard the reports on why the US is not happy that the Caribbean nations continue to work with China. And this is what Marco Rubio had to say, the Secretary of State of the United States of America, on his visit to Suriname. He was in Suriname just the other day in his visit to the Caribbean. He left off in Jamaica, he went to Guyana, and then he ended his trip in Suriname. And this is what Marco Rubio had to say about the Caribbean working with China and the policy and what is happening in the region in regards to China and the US influence. Have a listen.
Have the two superpowers reach an accommodation or understanding where each power limits their military, diplomatic, and economic presence in the backyards of the other powers, meaning spheres of influence for each power. And then related to China, in 2019, you supported legislation to have the U.S. government support the protesters in Hong Kong, the pro-democracy protesters, and mostly the protests are peaceful, but also occasionally they disrupt
the reporter asking a question. Rubio will respond
your rationale for
right now.
Deporting campus protesters in the U.S., would you now support the Chinese Communist Party or Hong Kong authorities deporting foreigners who took part in those protests in 2019?
Yeah, the first question is silly because the people that we're getting rid of in our country are vandalizing. They're not protesters. They're taking over college campuses.
Rubio.
They're harassing fellow students. We let them in our country to study. We gave them a visa because they said, I want to go to your university, I want to get a degree. They didn't say, I want to go to university and I want to vandalize your library and I want to chase Jewish students down the street and I want to wear a mask over my face like if it's Halloween and terrorize people. We didn't give them a visa to do any of that. So we don't want those people in our country. They're not demonstrating for, they're going beyond demonstration. They are going and they're creating a ruckus. They are creating riots basically on campus, and it's unfair for students. Some of these schools are some of the most expensive schools we have in America. People pay a lot of money to go to these schools. They borrow money to go to these schools, and you can't even go to class because some lunatic who's covering their face is running through campus, spray painting things, harassing people, and they're in my country as a guest. We want them out. Every one of them I find, we're going to kick them out. On your first question, we don't talk about spheres of influence. The United States is an Indo-Pacific nation. We have relationships with Japan, South Korea, the Philippines. We're going to continue those relationships. My problem with China is twofold. The first is we haven't, in many cases, we don't have American companies that have shown an interest in investing in a country, so they don't show up. You leave them with no option. My second problem is, in a lot of these countries, the Chinese companies go in, they do a terrible job. Not a bad job, a terrible job. I just came from Guyana, where we had to drive on a road the Chinese built. You were on the trip with us?
Yeah.
Or did you have to go on this road?
Yeah.
Okay, we almost all had concussions because the plane, the road was so bad. It was terrible. They paid these people to build this road, and then they bring their workers. They don't hire you. They bring their workers in to do all the work. And then, or they want you to borrow a bunch of money, and then they hold it over your head. So what I want is for countries to have an alternative to that. What we want is for countries to have an alternative to that. If you're going to build a road, I want you to have a real road. They were better off with the dirt road than the road we were just on. And it's not the fault of the current administration. In Guyana, that was a road that was built before, but they did a terrible job. If you did that job in America, someone would sue you for a lot of money. Okay? It was a bad road. So we want to be able to ensure that we are providing alternatives.
There you had it, my friends. That was Marco Rubio answering a question in his visit to Suriname. He ended by saying that the Chinese is doing roads in the Caribbean, they're doing bridges, and he bashed China and said they did a bad job in Guyana in regards to a highway that they would have constructed there. But the US is not making any counter offer. The US is not offering the Caribbean anything. The only thing they're offering the Caribbean is visas. And Caribbean citizens have to pay for US visas. Caribbean citizens do not go to the US visa free. China is offering low interest loans. They're offering, they're not meddling in the local affairs of the Caribbean. The US is a different superpower. The US want to control everything and not give back anything in return. But the Caribbean depend on America heavily for imports such as food, goods and services. They depend on the United States heavily for that. So that is what the United States of America is holding against the Caribbean, and the Trump administration is clearly warning the Caribbean in a smart way to tell them, choose the USA or else, my friends. The US has long expressed concerns about China's growing influence in the Caribbean, particularly through its Belt and Road Initiative, infrastructure projects and financial investments. The US is issuing a warning to the Caribbean islands, signaling an escalation in geopolitical competition in the region. The Trump administration marked this competition by this state visit by Marco Rubio. Washington has historically viewed the Caribbean as part of its sphere of influence and has sought to counter Beijing's economic and political inroads. China's investments in port, roads, energy, and telecommunications in the Caribbean have given it a significant leverage, raising U.S. concerns about strategic dependencies and security risk. This is what the U.S. think of the Caribbean nation islands. They are worried that Beijing is growing rapidly in the Caribbean, so that's why they're there. So the Caribbean nation islands, we are strong in the Caribbean. We are in a strategic location and our people are well educated. Our island nations are paradise and we have natural resources, my friends. That is why Beijing and Washington, the US and China is fighting over the Caribbean right now. But I am tired of people using the Caribbean to benefit themselves. We must take the benefits that they have to offer, but we must develop our own plan. The mission of this channel is to bridge the gap between the African continent and the African diaspora, which includes the Caribbean nation islands, my friends. Let us join together with the African continent and strengthen our own people. Any extra benefit that comes to our people will be welcome, but we will not just sit here and let China and America fight over our birthright. It will not happen, my friends. If you're watching for the first time, please consider subscribing to my channel. You can also join the channel and become a member by clicking the link in this description box and signing up to become a channel member and support the journey of bridging the gap between the African continent and the African diaspora. I also have a travel channel. The link is here in the description box as well. Go on over and subscribe to that channel. I post videos every day reacting to breaking news that affect the African continent and the African diaspora. Please consider subscribing if you're watching for the first time. As I said before, you can also support the channel by liking the video, sharing it with all your friends and family, and comment your thoughts and opinion on this topic and my other videos, and let me know what you think, what your thoughts are. Let's have a wonderful interactive conversation, my friends. I read the comments and I respond to some. Sometimes I don't respond to all the comments, but I read through a lot of comments, so I do pay attention to your comments and recommendations, and many of you would have some great ideas that I agree with. So continue to comment on the channel, continue to like the videos. I post videos every day reacting to breaking news that affect the Caribbean nation islands and the African diaspora and the African continent, my friends. The mission of this channel, as I said, is to bridge the gap between the African continent and the African diaspora. The African diaspora is mainly the Caribbean nation islands from Jamaica down to Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, up to Haiti, Cuba, the Bahamas. You have Aruba, you have Curacao, Suriname, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, Haiti, Guadeloupe, Martinique, the Virgin Islands, Anguilla, St. Martin. Somebody said, one of my wonderful subscribers said that I don't talk about St. Martin a lot. Big up to St. Martin. St. Martin is primarily a black African country. Lots of our people live and reside in St. Martin, but half of St. Martin is Dutch and half is French, which means it was colonized by both the French and the Dutch, but on the island itself are mostly our people of African descent living on that island. So big up St. Martin. Much love coming from this channel beyond Uncut. Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago. The African continent, we have South Africa down there. We have Kenya. We have Nigeria and Ghana. Botswana, Namibia. I posted a video about Namibia yesterday and how Namibia would have revoked 31 Western countries visa-free travel to Namibia. That video was yesterday. Make sure to check it out. Namibia have its first ever female president, and she's doing great things. She would have said to the Western countries, if you're not going to give Namibia visa-free access to your country, we will revoke our visa-free access as well. So my friends, I will be posting tomorrow in the next video. Let me know what you think about this topic of the USA and the China's growing influence in the Caribbean. What should the Caribbean do? And how should we respond to this growing threat by the USA and China to take over the whole of the Caribbean and leave us here just to serve them? It will not happen, my friends. We must bridge the gap between the African continent and the African diaspora. Let us focus on our people. Let us focus on our well-being, because everybody have their own ideas on how they're going to empower themselves. So let us have our own idea to empower ourselves. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you tomorrow in the next video. This is Beyond Uncut, signing out.